Okay, so what do we have so far? Well, we have our IK arm and our FK arm. And right now, the hierarchies work fine. As you can see, we can take anything in here and pose it. Let's say that I want to bring the FK arm this way and maybe twist it a little bit like that and then do a pose like that. And that's all good. And our IK arm is also able to move quite nicely. And we got our auto clavicle setup working. But one thing that we have not done yet is the actual arm of the character is not moving. We've got the clavicle set up, but the arm is not set up yet. So that's what we're going to take care of next. We want the arm, the actual arm for the character from the main rig, to start moving towards either of these two arms as the user blends them together. So the user will be able to tell the arm to go towards the IK arm or the FK arm and blend in between, so he can smoothly transition from one system to the other. So let's work on that. And actually, we're going to have to do this in three different, let's call them phases. One is we need to get the arm to blend. Then we need to get the clavicle to blend. And the clavicle is a little bit more difficult because it has this auto clavicle behavior that we need to also take care of. And finally, we need the hand to also follow the FK hand. And this one is going to be interesting because the actual hand animation rig is all FK. It's just a hierarchy of items that you see here. There's no IK hand in this case, which is good. There are certain situations where you might require to want to have IK systems on the fingers, like for example, if the character has to do like a little walk cycle with his fingers, then you want IK. But for most intents and purposes, we don't really need that. However, the FK controls for the hand needs to be available at the FK position, the position of the FK arm, or the IK position, which is over here. So we're gonna have to find a way to do that, get this guy to move like as the blending dictates, without breaking the wrist of the character, and also not breaking the hierarchy that we have set for the FK system, because it allows us to go up and down the hierarchy very nicely using the keyboard. So we're gonna see how to do that. But let's get started with the arms, and we'll do the rest as we move along. So for the arms, it's actually very simple. All we need to do is we're gonna grab our first joint over here, and we're going to rotation constrain it to two different items. We're gonna first rotation constrain it to the IK shoulder joint, which is this one over here, the red one. So let's just grab this guy. Compensation is off, and shift select my IK first joint and say rotation constraint. And as you can see now, he's pointing towards the IK elbow over here, which is good. But we're also gonna have to add another rotation constraint towards the FK upper arm. So we select both and say rotation, and now you can see he's kind of like midway between both, and that's because the rotation constraint right now is weighting 50% towards one rotation, which is the one over here, and 50% towards this other guy's rotation. So he gets to go midway. We're gonna correct that in a second, but first let's do also the lower arm. So we're gonna select that joint over there and shift select the IK elbow joint and rotation constraint that. As you can see now, he's pointing the same rotation that this guy has. But now we're gonna also shift select the lower arm for the FK chain and do a rotation constraint over there. So this guy again gets to get half and half of both rotations. And now that we have that set, let's do the actual blending system. So I'm going to select both of those guys and bring them over to the schematic. So let's see what we got. We've got our joints and their respective rotation constraints, as you can see here. Now what we need to do is we need to somehow set a system that allows us to blend between these two targets in the constraint. And we're going to do exactly what we've done before over here for the clavicles. We're going to set the 1 minus 1 system that will allow us to blend in the same fashion. So let's just do that. I'm going to add a basic math add node over here, and this one is going to be our IK weight. So let's call them UTI for utility node, our arm IK weight. Okay, and let's set it to 1 immediately. And let's add a subtract node, and we're going to call this one UTI our arm FK weight. Okay, and this guy is going to be 1 minus whatever is coming out from the IK weight. So when the IK weight, just to review this because we've already talked about it, when this guy's weight is 1, this guy's weight is going to be 1 minus 1, that's 0. When this guy's weight is 0, this guy's going to be 1 minus 0, which gives us 1. So he's going to be actually exactly the opposite value from this guy. And if he's 0.5, then 1 minus 0.5 was going to be 0.5. So it balances out. And all we have to do now is connect these two nodes to the respective weights in the constraint. So fortunately, since we've been naming our objects in the scene properly, it's pretty easy to follow where to connect them. That's why it's important to set your names properly as you work. So the IK arm weight is going to go into the IK weight channels, and then the FK is going to go to the FK control weight channels. So as you can see, as I wired this, we could see that our arm just moved to the IK position. And it's now following our IK rig perfectly. Okay. We can also move the arm up vector. You can see the elbow moving. So that's all good. Let's see what happens when we change the value on our math node. As I start to drag it down, you can see the arm moves. And when I reach 0, our arm is going to be perfectly aligned to the FK nodes. And I actually can go in and start rotating those. And our arm is going to pose properly. So that's great. We now have a properly blending arm. But you might say, wait a second, that's not right. He's not where he should be. Like the elbow is not at the elbow location of the FK arm, and same for the rest of the arm. And obviously you can see that in the hand too. Well, the reason is we've done nothing for the clavicle yet. The clavicle is not yet following the FK clavicle, as you can see. So that's what we are going to do in the next video. We're going to take care of the clavicle setup for our character. So I'll see you over there. Okay, so our arm is moving now, and it's following nicely. So the thing that we have right now is that when the arm is moved over to the FK position, let's set this to 0 to see that move. You will notice that even though the arm is nicely following the FK hierarchy, there's this gap, there's this delta between the actual orientations of the character's joints against the FK hierarchy. And the reason for that is because of the auto clavicle system. So what's going on here is, even though the arm is set right now to follow the FK arm, the auto clavicle is still working. Okay? So this is what we get. That's what we have, this weird offset. And even if I turn off the auto clavicle amount, let's say I turn this to 0, you'll see that the clavicle goes back to its original neutral pose. So we needed to follow the FK arm. So that's what we're going to do now. And the other thing I want to do is, I thought that it would be nice that even though we would be using the FK hierarchy, which I can use to rotate stuff, and using the FK joints, it would also be nice if I could still go in and use this guy to control the clavicle pose manually. So I could just use both controls. It would be up to the animator to decide what he wants to use. So I don't want to have the amount totally off, but let's see how we go about that, how to enable both systems. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new locator. Let's create him over here. And I'm going to call him rig R clavicle position reference. And this guy is going to be referencing the position at which the clavicle is respective to this control over here. So what we're going to do is parent it. Well, first we're going to match it. Let's match it to that control over there. And we're going to turn him into a nice little box. So let's make him also smaller. Okay. So he's going to be our reference for the clavicle position. We cannot use this guy because this guy is part of the clavicle rig, so we need something that is totally outside of that. And before doing this, I think I'm going to reset the rotations on the clavicle just to be sure. And I'm going to match this guy again. Well, he was already good, but there you go. So now that this is done, we're going to parent this guy to our joint on the spine, which is spine 05. And the reason is we want him to be outside of the entire clavicle rig, but it needs to be also a child of the parent of the clavicle rig, which is this joint. So it uses the same parent space. So with compensation on, we're going to parent in place, and now he's part of the rig. Okay, now to get the autoclavicle to follow this control no matter in which mode we are, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this node, the IK clavicle target, which is the one that determines where the autoclavicle is going to be pointing at, and I'm going to be constraining it to this control. Okay, so that way when I move him, this guy is going to move with him. So let's go to modifiers and add a position constraint. We can do it without compensation because both are in exactly the same location. And now when I grab this guy and move it around, that guy follows. So no matter in which mode we're in, IK or FK, our clavicle is going to follow around. Okay, so that's good. So now to get the clavicle to follow the IK or the FK arm, we're going to create another locator. So let me show you how that's going to work. I'm gonna put back the clavicle in a different orientation. So you can see right now that the arm is not following his staying there. It's because the clavicle is not moving. Because the autoclavicle system is set to work only with the IK controls, not with the FK. So we're gonna fix that. So let's create another locator, and we're gonna call this guy PAR for parent right IK clavicle. Okay, and we're gonna make him part of the IK controls right there, and we're gonna take our control, the clavicle control, and make it a child of it. Okay, so now this guy is the child of this guy. Actually, I'm gonna undo that. I forgot to match it before I create the relationship. So we're gonna match it to the clavicle control right there. Now we can take him and make him a child. Let's just make this guy smaller because he's quite big. There you go, something like that for now. And now we can take the actual control and make it his child. So, good. So now we're going to take this parent and make him move along with the FK system or the IK system. So what we're going to do is, let's constrain it to our reference that we have here, which is the reference for the position of the IK clavicle, from which the auto clavicle is going to start, and also from the arm that we have for the upper arm. So let's do the same. We're going to select him and do a position constraint, and then the same for this guy, position constraint. So as you can see right now, it's halfway between both. So we're going to add him to this weighting system that we already have set. So let's bring him with his constraint over here. And we're just going to connect him to the same values we've been using. So for the IK, we're going to use the rig clavicle post ref. And for the FK, we're using the upper arm control. So let's connect the FK weight over there, the IK weight over there. And as you can see, now our clavicle is going to be using either location, which is now the correct behavior. So right now you can see that the arm completely realigned itself to the position of the FK joints, which is exactly what we wanted. And as we change the value on the IK weight, you can see the clavicle go back to the proper location to use the IK arm. So that's all working nice. Now the only thing that is left to do is, if you notice, even though I'm at the correct FK position, the auto clavicle system is still working. And I don't want that. I don't want the auto clavicle to work while the animator is in FK mode, because that could mean that the animator could be using the FK arm to animate, but also moving the IK arm to match a pose between both in the future, and the clavicle is going to be moving, and that's not what we want. What we want is, once the animator is in FK mode, I want the auto clavicle system to stop working. And that's actually quite easy to do. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to come in here. This is the rig that we used for the auto clavicle, and I'm going to tell it to be based upon the weight that we're setting on this IK weight over here. So when the weight is 1, I want the auto clavicle to work exactly the way it's been working so far, but when it's 0, this should stop working at all. And that's easily done by taking, this is the amount of auto clavicle movement we're going to have, and we're going to multiply that by the weight of the IK system. So I need a multiply node here in the middle. So I'm going to add a math multiply, and what I'm going to do is disconnect these sockets over here. You can use the control key to click on them and disconnect them, and I'm going to put our multiply in the middle and then reconnect it to those two sockets. Okay, and if we set this guy to 0, there's no auto clavicle at all. Like right now it's at 0. Let's move this. As you can see, auto clavicle stopped working. And if I set it to 1, it's going to be using the weight value, which is 0.2, to operate. And the last thing I'm going to do is set the second value, which is going to be our multiplier, to be the IK weight. So we just connect it over there. And now, when we are in FK mode, you can see FK is all nice and aligned. Let's just rotate this, set it to any pose you want. So far, so good. The auto clavicle is not working. But if I go into my IK arm weight, I can blend back my arm goes back into IK mode. I can take my IK, go. Right now there's a lot of weight on the auto clavicle. Let's go check that out. Oh, of course. That's because right now the weight I have on the IK system is almost 4. So let's bring back that to 1. Just because you can drag it past that. And that's affecting the auto clavicle multiplier. Obviously, we're not going to be controlling the blending through this math node. Like, we're not going to have the animator come in here into the rig and use these things to blend. I'm just setting this. This in the future is going to become sort of like a pass-through node, where there would be some channel somewhere on a control and the UI of the character that controls the blending, and it's going to be connected to exactly this socket. So that's going to allow us to do the blending from the UI of the character. But right now, everything is back to working the way it was before, except our arm is now properly weighted between the IK arm and the FK arm. There is one thing though that is we have to still take care of, and this is the thing. If you see, if I take for example the elbow and rotate it, you can see the arm is moving fine, but so is the hand. And this is great, I mean, for a character that is walking or moving or something. But there could be a situation where you would want to be able to move the elbow of the character or the torso or whatever and have the hand stay in place. Let's say that the character is going to be leaning on a table or something and moving. So you want to be able to animate the rest of the character, but have the hand stay in place perfectly without movement or without any movement at all. And right now that's not possible because the hand is moving with the arm. So we need to have the hand be able to blend also between using the arm's transform space or a global world transform space that will not move with the character. That will be completely static. So we have to set that up, and that's what we're going to do in the next video. So let's keep on going.